Yeah, it looks like less.
Just works for me.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. Welcome to the people that have joined us here in council chambers. I'm sure they're driven by their interest in the goings on of council, and they'll be with us for the next 4 hours. Glad to hear that. And also welcome to all of you at home who have chosen to join us on YouTube. And as always, if you are at home on YouTube, when the regular session of council is over, before we go in camera, you will have an opportunity to ask council a question about anything that is discussed here tonight. There will also be an opportunity, item number 3, I think, on the agenda, the public input session, when people will be able to have an opportunity to make a comment or to council on an issue that concerns them. So with that, we will begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight we gather with the intent followed by the Peace and Friendship Treaty, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order, and just before we approve the actual agenda, I would like to share with the members of council and the members of the public who are here the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities recognize the town of Mahone Bay, the town of Berwick, and the town of Antigonish for their efforts in establishing the community solar garden projects. We have a twin to these downstairs that we received from the same organization in recognition of our wind farm that we had initiated back in 2011, 2012. So this will go down in the foyer of Town Hall with the other one. And we appreciate the recognition of the efforts of all of the staff and councils in realizing this opportunity. And that project is just about ready to come online with power ready to, if it's not already flowing.
Is it not quite, but it's getting very close.
There you go.
David, there seems to be a problem with your camera. We didn't.
Yes, I know. I'm
Yeah.
just here. I'm going to enter my email
When you
again.
held that award up, we were noticing.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I don't know. I had to update it.
If it's updated, you could also try going back to the original link.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do it that way. Well, let's continue. Entertain a motion on the agenda. Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I'd appreciate if we could add to the agenda an item associated with the Heritage Property Grant Fund policy and the amendments that that we discussed at the last meeting, and the hope that we can ratify those amendments this evening.
Okay,
With that amendment, I'd make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
okay. Seconded, Councillor Lonis Croft.
Just for the record, I put it under 7.2 under council items.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Motion's moved, seconded. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. The agenda is approved. Let's go to item number 3, the public input session. To regular council meeting, minutes of October 26th. Thank you.
The minutes of the regular council meeting of October 26th, 2023 be accepted, circulated. So
Thank you. Moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Now we'll ask the public if they have anything they would like to say to council. And is there anyone at home? Yeah, I see your hand. If you would stand, state your name and what your address in town, please.
This is Salter, 15 Cherry Lane, right up the street. Thank you for giving us the opportunity for input. This is in regard to the petition that I and several others circulated during the month of September and October concerning modified mufflers, that this problem has increased. It's just gotten worse and worse. And I'll keep it brief because I know other people want to speak. But
We already have your commentary in the paperwork that we received.
Right.
So,
what I would just briefly like to say is that the homes that I visited, we have over 100 signatures, but it took a long time to get them because every place that I went to had a story to tell. And there was so much upset. It actually surprised me that as many people were as concerned as they are about this noise. It is so disruptive and it just continues. So some of the houses I timed it, one house 40 minutes. Another woman said to me yesterday that she thinks she's gonna have to put her house on the market. She can't even sleep. She lives on Main Street near the stop sign. So this is an issue that is concerning many people. There is a lot of upset about it, and we're really hoping that the council can find a solution to this and put it in place. I know the province has kicked the can down to the municipalities, and I'm sure that the municipalities are not happy about that. But because it's happened, I think that there's a responsibility to do something about it, because as I said in the petition, it's extremely disruptive and getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have some time left. Yes, please.
Marilyn Herrick Park, 704 Main Street. What I found, Susan, as well, when visiting, knocking on doors and asking for signatures, was that a lot of people were concerned about the speed. And we weren't addressing that issue, but we do know, along with the mufflers and the revving up, there is speed. And as I said, that wasn't part of our intention with this, but it is a concern by many citizens. That there's too much speeding going on in town.
Here,
It works better that way sometimes.
so you can look forward to that. But I do have a question. A couple of meetings ago, the issue was raised again, and it was left that you all were gonna contact the RCMP and see if they were willing, and to what extent, to enforce the bylaws. And I wondered if you get an answer from the RCMP.
That topic was to be discussed at the Police Advisory Board. Unfortunately, because of a lack of participants to make quorum, the meeting was canceled. So at the next PAB meeting, we will raise the issue again. It's been raised numerous times with the RCMP. And the problem seems to be, oh, well, we weren't there, we didn't see it, call us and tell us what the plate number is of the car. But people have done that and it doesn't seem to have
It doesn't work.
the desired effect. But it is still an item for the PAB agenda.
Find out how much they would be willing to enforce, time wise and the actual act, right?
It's always an issue to find the time, and we're paying, $340,000 a year as it is in our CMP contract fees. That basically gives us the services represents 2 officers. And if we need them, they'll be here. But if you're having a bank robbery, or a drug raid, they'll be here. But they don't seem to wanna they don't have the time to be here to deal with noisy mufflers and speedy drivers.
Have they said that or just because they put it on?
They've never actually said it, but the issue of resourcing is part of the problem.
Yeah, right. Okay, thanks.
Hello,
Yeah, hi there, Ann Crossman, 482 Main Street. I had a chance to speak with the RCMP last year over some noise issues that I was concerned about, and I called them directly, and I had the courtesy of a return call, which I really appreciated. And the officer was lovely. He said to me, "Ann, the only thing we can enforce is any laws the Mahone Bay Council approves and posts if it has to do with public." So in other words, he said, we can't come and say, well, you're not allowed to hang out here and smoke your drugs and drink your beer, because unless there's a sign that says no loitering or no stopping or no parking, how are we supposed to deal with the situation? And I think that makes perfect sense to me. I think that the idea in this particular case of the mufflers is that there should be at either end, near those gorgeous retro signs, welcome to Mahone Bay and thanks for coming. There should be a sign that clearly states something about noise laws within our community. Once upon a time in the olden days, I think that it was all commercial establishments on Main Street is basically my understanding, or to a great degree were, but times have changed and there's an awful lot of residences. And I think it would be a very simple way to pass a bylaw and then post it, and then we could all call the RCMP. My feeling is, from my experience, there's a handful of people that are a constant issue, and that beyond that, there's always going to be the odd person, but people wouldn't be here if it was the odd person. It's the constant, and that's the regular, and they need to be dealt with.
okay, thank you.
Hi, excuse me, Ronnie Hillman, 362 Main Street, proud owner. I'm living here in Mahone Bay for the last 20 years. I've applauded the stop sign that came down through Clearway Street, certainly for our children walking to and from school. And that has been a great thing, but these cars, not only is the mufflers, but these cars come speeding through, even with mothers and fathers walking these children, and they're still not stopping. So part of my thing is it's a policing issue. And I've talked to the RCMP, as Ann and many of us have. And so I did see a police car parked up just past Bucks down on Clearway Street the other morning. And it was like at 8:30 in the morning. Well, that's the wrong time of day. By then, luckily, our younger children are there. But it's hard to, I don't know this for a fact, but I think we have workers going to the plastics plant that are screaming by my house at between 5:30 and 6 in the morning. And they're going to work, and to be honest, I think they're pissed off at the rest of us that we're sleeping. And I hate to be that kind of judgmental, but it feels like that, and they're gunning these mufflers. And so they stop at the stop sign by my house, and they do stop, but then they gun. And they sit there and they gun and they gun, and then they take off. And I can hear them going down towards your place. And well, to all of you, and I can hear them, and it's in the summer, it's whatever, and it's like, really. And this morning, I went out actually on my deck, because there's this one white car, black windows, and again, I don't know what the thing is on the black windows, but there's this. Lately, there was unfortunately a terrible car accident where someone I think unfortunately passed away, and I thought, I think I know who that was. I thought, because this guy went screaming down my house, like beyond crazy, speeding through, and with this muffler thing. And then again, I said, and well, luckily it wasn't him. But anyway, This morning, I went onto my deck and he stopped at the stop sign, swam out, and I had my little whatever. But he had a blanked out license plate on the back of his car. It was oblique, so I couldn't even see what his license plate was. And then he took off, you know, crazy, and with again these, the noise. So I mean, we're all saying the same thing, so I'm not gonna belabor the point. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but for those of us who live close to Main Street and who, you know, it's a disruption. I have cracks in my gyprock in my house, my windows rattle. I have an older home, I understand that, but it's annoying.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
We live on Main Street, also 473 Main Street, and it's very disruptive.
Hmm.
And I'm just afraid, we have quite a few small children in our area now. And, you know, they're going so fast, they have no control of the cars. They could hit one of these little children, you know, so easily. They're going so fast. And we happen to be second gear. They come by our place and they hit the second gear. And it's really, really loud. You can't talk on your deck. And I'm worried about the property value. Because, you know, somebody coming to beautiful little Mahone Bay, so quiet and lovely. No, it's not.
Councilor Owens Claus, would you like to say something?
Well, I can agree with all of your comments, because I'm right there, and I know at the last police advisory meeting that we did have, both Annette St. Ange and I said, you're welcome to use our driveways at any time.
I've seen that too, because I live behind.
And because we've done it before, when Brent Covers was the police chief, he regularly would set up with, you know, and sometimes it was 5:30 in the morning, because it's not necessarily catching, but the presence is a deterrent itself. So the visibility of an officer in that area every once in a while at different times, 9 o'clock at night, you know how the noise picks up. It's an early in the morning. I'm an early morning walker. Sometimes I've had to go back in my driveway because they're coming, well, right through. And, you know, I've also remarked that many people don't even stop. They do a roll. They roll through that intersection. So anyway, you have my empathy and support. But we have spoken to the RCMP, certainly about it.
So what will happen now is that as we go through the agenda, your petition is under correspondence in 5.2. And when we would do that particular item in the course of the meeting, I would anticipate that one of our councils will make a motion to refer this particular item to the police advisory board or the one of the council committees or to staff to find some kind of a direction, a way ahead. What is within our legal purview? What can we do to create a change that they can then be implemented to deal with this? Okay? All right. Thank you for coming in tonight and talking with us. And we don't need computer audio. Okay. There's no one online that wishes to comment? Clerk? No. No, okay, thank you. With that, then, we'll end the public input session and we'll go to our illustrious fire chief for his quarterly report. Thank you, if you would.
Any questions on the report submitted?
Counselor Feeny?
Mayor, I did have one question for the chief, and it was about the fire calls in September for illegal burning. I'm wondering what happens when you come across illegal burning? Like, what are the ramifications of burning illegally? Like, what are the tickets? How do you handle that?
There is a bylaw in town.
Mhm.
Most of the time, just it's first offense as such, give them benefit of the doubt, just inform them of, you know, what their obligations are.
Is the department authorized to write a ticket, or do you need to go to the town bylaw officer to get?
Bylaw,
So you have to make the
right,
phone call. Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really have repeat offenders,
Mhm.
but.
No, I doubt it.
So, yeah.
Once a fire truck rolls up in front of your house, chances are you don't do it twice. Thank you.
Counselor Carver?
Thank you. Chief, I was curious about the number of the basement flood calls. I mean, I'm not surprised, but my question is, how do you see your responsibility in the fire department in attending to flooded basements?
Personally, I think it's kind of out of our remit. I mean, I think I think most people are aware that basements flood, they should take matters to mitigate that. There's the odd occasion where, you know, say maybe their pumps failed or it just won't keep up and we can offer some assistance. But I think really it's very time consuming for us, and also it's hard on our equipment. I know we pretty much stopped pumping basements a few years ago, and that was after we damaged a few pumps. And I think it basically cost the department tens of thousands in repairs to equipment. And it was again for repeat offenders who wouldn't do anything to, you know, help themselves. So.
But in this situation, it was such an unusual situation that I don't want to press you on it, but
It was such an, we wouldn't have had enough pumps anyway.
yeah.
Even if we could have pumped, and then where would you pump the water to? Because it was just flowing over the land anyway. There was nowhere to get rid of it.
So all these ones that are listed as calls aren't necessarily ones that were attended, is that right?
Nope, we attended
You went
everyone.
to well,
We went to everyone and at least gave them some advice or some help if we could.
so should the town be encouraging people to install sub pumps?
They didn't work.
They don't.
They didn't
No,
work
no.
in that.
They couldn't
Yeah.
pump hard enough. to
No.
handle.
Doesn't, yeah, that storm, like, even if you could pump the water out of the basement, the chances are it was just running back in again.
I was one person who called, and mine was because I wanted to know if it was safe to go to sleep in my house because of an electrical fire. Things with pumping or anything, but I think there's a safety issue there too. Not just pumping, but
Yeah, we had a
You're
few
saying-
people that were just, you know, they were wondering how, you know, if it got close to their panel or equipment, things like that.
Yeah. But we don't have any kind of a prescribed criteria based on which the fire department would come and pump your beer. I got a call today from a citizen who during the last major rainstorm that we had called for assistance because her sump pump couldn't handle the flow. And she was basically told the fire department doesn't do that. Right, and she wanted to know why some people get pumped out and some people don't. What's the rule of thumb to decide?
It's just the judgment call when you turn up. I mean, some of these people, I had calls to some people's and I went and they had an inch of water in their basement. They had a walkout basement.
She had 3 feet
Wow.
of water in her basement. Her sump pump just, it was working, but it couldn't handle the flow.
Yeah, I know. without knowing exactly which
details.
property it was, I wouldn't, but either we had no resources or there wasn't anything we could do. I mean, I know during that storm, we did prioritize, we did pump the Alliant building a couple of times to keep the water off of the communications. Otherwise, town would have lost all communications because that would have been underwater. And we also pumped the nursing home, otherwise they would have had to evacuate.
Understand.
And it was there was when it first happened, there was a couple of people we did manage to help out and there was one basement we started pumping it, we pumped for an hour. The pump ran out of gas by the time they went to the truck, got the gas jug, filled the pump up again. It was nothing when we went pumping, so.
Yeah.
So what, we could have just sat there all night and we would have made no headway.
So the solution that someone suggested is to contact the appropriate technician or person with the know-how to make the changes in your house, in your basement, in your pumping system to accommodate those high volume storms now.
Yeah.
Don't wait till.
And the town also has to make sure these people aren't pumping the water into the stormwater system. Cause that's gonna overload your stormwater system.
The stormwater system,
Regular sewer system.
the regular sewer.
Well,
septic,
and you've got stormwater,
one or two streets that got stormed,
but that would overload that as well.
yeah.
You know, I was one of the ones that had to have assistance that night. I was over pumping other basements and I got a call from my wife saying, we need help. So we did end up pumping in there. My deep freeze actually was floating around the basement. So, it's those situations, I have some pump and it usually works pretty good, but when you're surrounded by water, there's not much you can do to keep the water out of your basement. To pump it away.
Okay. Does anyone?
Just a quick question. I see there's a couple of calls for down power lines outside of the town's electrical service area. So I'm just curious, like, how do you interact with NSPI on those? Do you guys get the call before them? Do you get out there and call them, or?
Usually we get called before it's called in by a 911, the lines are down, and then we just have the Scotia business notify Nova Scotia Power that there's lines down.
So do you end up having to have people wait for them?
Sometimes, depending on what the situation is. I know there was some down on the Oakland Road, we waited because the line was low. And then we actually stayed and cleared the tree out of the road. Sometimes we wait, sometimes we just make sure it's safe and return. Otherwise, we sit there babysitting power lines for hours.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, obviously in town, where we got our own crew, they're never far off, but Nova Scotia Power could be dealing with hundreds of issues around the county. So I was just curious if you'll stay.
Definitely an issue sometimes.
Well,
Interesting.
Councilor Kerr.
I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone, should just say, we commend you for that incredible services that you performed during that period. Really, a lot of work, you must have been exhausted.
No? Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And just a reminder that I think Saturday evening, you're having your first annual firefighters dinner in how many years? 3 years, 4 years?
4 years.
Since COVID began?
Yeah.
So, good show. And as Councillor Carver suggested, and as we always remind you, that we are ever grateful of the fact that you are there. Every night when our heads go on the pillows, your kind of heads are just a little bit higher in case the alarm goes off. So, thank you for that.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Al.
Right.
Okay. RCMP. We have no one's here for that, obviously.
Mayor,
This calls attention to the capacity issues we talked about earlier.
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the quarterly police report for the town of Mahone Bay, which is for the period of July to September 2023 for information.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Just before we go to a vote on the motion, remind the folks at home, this report is in the package for tonight's meeting. And it does have statistics on quite a wide variety of crimes. Most of them are zero in Mahone Bay. And they also have statistics on vehicle speeds as recorded in town. With the streets that we put the machine out on. They download the data at the end of a 2-week, 3-week period. And we can see what time of day and what the range of speeds are. And what the highest speed is going through. So just to tell you that information is in the RCMP report, if you would like to take the time to read it. And with that on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried to receive and file the report for information. We should, yes.
Awesome.
Okay, we have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Wilson. On the motion to receive and file for information, all in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, let's go to item 5, correspondence.
Worship, move to receive and file item 5.1, Nova Scotia Fisheries and Agricultural Loan Board annual report.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Carver, all in favor? Motion's carried. Item 5.2, petition to outlaw modified mufflers. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, George. I want to make a motion to get a bylaw in place for this, but I would like to thank Susan specifically for writing that letter with all her pals and people that she knows in town. Because maybe I was supposed to know this, but I didn't know that the province had changed the Motor Vehicle Act and booted all this stuff down across the hill.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
We found that out from our MLA's office,
Yeah.
Susan Corcoran Greek, yeah.
Anyway, with that, and given that the legal implications are pretty clear, and by the way, we years that these mufflers are legal and there's nothing can be done about them. Apparently that's not true either. So with that in mind, I would like to move that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to deal with the issues of noisy mufflers in particular.
That's in that motion?
Moved and seconded. He doesn't even live on Main Street. She lives right by the stop sign. One of the problems of living up the back of town is I don't hear anything.
I'm gonna talk about noisy mufflers on motorcycles, because I hear them going up the hill.
Interesting.
I hear them up Pleasant and up along.
Yeah, you would, I'm sure. Okay, on the motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. It'll go to staff. And staff's report back to council will be on the agenda for an upcoming meeting, maybe in time for the December meeting. You think, Mr. Hyde, that's a little short?
I think most likely we'll bring this with the draft noise bylaw because it has so much crossover in terms of the terminology and everything.
Okay.
So whenever that's coming forward, I think it would make sense to bring this forward at the same time.
All right.
Thank you, Susan. That was.
Thank you.
And everybody, everyone.
This issue.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to item 6.1, staff report to council for the 14th of November.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm still thinking about how I need to get my own muffler fixed. It's getting noisy enough now. I have an appointment for next week.
Been there
It's getting
before.
noisy enough, almost think I did it on purpose.
Thanks.
So as usual, we've got a short report to council for the first meeting of the month. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. Only 7 pages.
Yeah.
Lots on the go.
Yeah, I guess I should draw attention to the note on the request for an update from the cooperative housing group. I think that was number 33.
33.
We just put the response in there because it was quite brief, but I just wanted to make sure nobody missed it. It was just an update saying that the feasibility study was underway and a report was anticipated by December. So that's the response we got when we asked about the status of their work.
CAO and I were discussing that, the meeting that's coming up on Friday night with the cooperative,
Friday or Thursday.
Friday,
Friday. Yeah,
yeah, I'll be in Broadway.
but it's, I don't think it would do anyone a favor. We, as counselors, went to that meeting and left them with the impression that we're sitting there with the old fire hall in our back pocket, ready to hand it over for a co-op housing project. In fact, council has not made a determination one way or the other. We're still waiting for the feedback from the organizing group, the co-op housing group, that they are developing a proposal. They got the funding from the federal government for the proposal development. We're still waiting for that before council is able to discuss and or offer a proposal or make a decision. It wouldn't be fair to the people that were there if we went to the meeting and said, oh no, shit, the land is there, because that hasn't been decided yet. Councilor.
Just in that regard, my understanding is that the meeting on Friday night is mainly information about cooperatives, with housing cooperatives. I don't think it's specifically about this land.
That's good.
So there are going to be representatives from several different cooperatives there. I understand.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Owens Croft.
Can I just ask a question on that topic is, should there be an environmental study of that property? Is it our responsibility to clean it up, or is it the purchasers? Or is it whatever our agreement is?
I'll defer to the CAO.
So that property, I think in question, you're referring to the existing fire state, the old fire hall building. I mean, you can sell a property and have it be anyone's responsibility. I mean, if we were to disclose the prior use of the building, it's been a fire station for the last 60 years. So I don't think we would anticipate doing anything else in terms of an environmental assessment now. If they're looking for external money, and that's a precondition to a grant or something, that, you know, that kind of work would need to be done. The phase one environmental assessment is a very simple process, because basically just a question and answer where we tell a consultant what we know about the historical use of the building, and then they tell us back, would that warrant further environmental investigation? So it is a pretty simple thing to do. The phase two is a much bigger deal, but it's only indicated when there has been use that would give that, you know, concern. While there has been obviously storage of vehicles on site, it hasn't been used as a garage, like for working on vehicles. And so I think if that hasn't been done, there's no particular reason to believe that there would be a need for a level 2
And there are
assessment.
no underground tanks for gas, they get it all from local.
Just to
gas.
take it back, yeah, just to, oh yeah, as far as, yeah, as far as filling the vehicles, they gotta go to an actual.
I think, Mayor, just to clarify, so over the last year, I mean, there has been a lot of progress regarding, you know, the future of the fire hall, although no formal plans have been made. There have been significant staff studies that have been executed upon and memos that have been delivered back to council. We've also had financial evaluation on the valuation of the property. And I think council's provided the organization with significant time so that they could query the government, receive funding and financing. So while it seems like not a lot has changed since last October or November, when Councillor Lonis Croft made the motion to provide the fire hall temporary use for public works, I think that was a good decision then. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot has happened, but a lot has happened. You know, so while it's true no decisions have been made, at least I think the pieces are coming together to be able to make a decision.
That's right.
So I just think for the public's information, the wheels are rolling slowly, but they are rolling.
And council remains open. Council is listening, and when we have all the information, hopefully the most appropriate decision will be made.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Any other questions?
Anyone
I'll
else?
report to council.
anyone entertain a motion to receive as presented for information?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please.
Seconded by Councillor Now. We've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to our draft meeting schedule for 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's that time again. We've provided a draft schedule. Obviously, there are some decisions that have been made in that. This is both council and waste. So any questions on either of those from members of council?
Councillor Carter.
Before it comes to a motion to approve the calendar, there are a couple of changes that might be considered. One is the Easter holidays. The Easter Monday holiday is marked, and that would be on April the 1st. And
Yeah.
Thirty,
Up on the.
March 31st.
31st.
it just gets slid around the head.
Over here, fair enough.
And then
That's a good catch.
and I just didn't want anyone to lose that staff holiday. And then the next one is in October. I can't make it scroll down. There's two, they're giving us two Thanksgiving holidays, Mondays, I think. The 7th and the 14th, one of those would be Thanksgiving, but I don't know which
I
one.
think it's
The latter one.
The heritage.
14th.
No,
Just
what,
wishful thinking for
but-
3 holiday
but
weekends.
but one is Heritage Day, right? There are 2 holidays in a row.
The 30th is the,
It's truth and
Yeah,
reconciliation.
this year didn't work out for 2 in a row.
Heritage is in February.
Yeah.
Truth and Reconciliation Day is.
That's the 30th of September.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So this
September.
year there will be a gap of 1 week in between the two, yeah.
Okay, so one of is it the 14th that's Thanksgiving or the 7th?
14th.
Okay.
Also notable about this calendar is that I suddenly realized that it's February 29th, it's leap year.
Ah, an extra day.
Yeah.
And it's red.
It was because November 11th ends up being on a Monday, not a.
We'll have to have a special meeting on.
Well, we put it, there is a council meeting on the 29th.
That's right, there is.
That's the
And
longest
it might be
cry.
the first council meeting on February 29th. Who knows?
I do have a question.
Go back to all the minutes.
So,
Sorry.
we will be in an election cycle. Does council meet during a writ period?
It's a good point that we don't meet all the way through the election. We did last election take, I think it was 1 meeting off, might have been 2.
First
The
November.
provincial election?
No, the municipal election.
I think it's the first meeting of November.
Oh, I thought you said.
I mean, I
When
guess
is
that'll
that?
be up to council, so if we
Thank you.
leave it, then we can always cancel it.
Yeah, I guess, there is gonna be a report coming up on the election shortly, so I guess our choice is, do we take it out now, or do we wait? The thing is, you wanna publish those,
Soon.
so.
We can always cancel a meeting.
That's fine.
Leave it and cancel.
And meetings will stand, the same thing during the writ period?
That's a good point. There won't be
I think
any.
it's a more, all meetings between this date and that date are,
That's May.
and so we'd have to make that a recommendation on Eric's report coming about the election.
We normally appoint new committee members as well.
Probably not until December.
December,
So
January.
getting the terminology right, like if the committees are gonna be canceled through to January, but the council meeting's only gonna miss 1. We better wait and ask Eric to bring that with I know there's a report coming on the election, because we've got to start talking about getting a televote lined up and
Oh, yeah.
hiring a returning officer and all the normal
Yeah.
stuff. And it's amazingly close, even though it's here.
It is. It's
It
first
will
time
be-
involved with the calendar. and
We'll make a note about that then. Yeah, thank you.
So we can bring that back to a future meeting.
Okay.
Well, sometimes I think most election cycles don't allow it because it gives elected officials more, visibility through YouTube and different sources.
We've always met right up
then-
until the election.
Really?
Yeah, but then there's a gap. I think a one meeting miss. And then council will have to figure out who's gonna serve on what committee.
Like the government's governing until the government changes,
That's right.
right? Historically.
Yeah. So this council would be sitting
I mean,
until the meeting that the new council is sworn in.
We actually have a meeting on that day.
Yeah. Yeah, and they give you your little name badge and see you
They
later.
took it away, actually.
I have every faith that the CAO will not have a 4-hour agenda 2 days before the election. I have complete trust.
Yeah, if we are meeting, it's typically for things that have come in.
Yeah,
So we'll follow up with a proper.
anything contentious will get
And we'll
kicked
make
down the road,
those adjustments. And
guaranteed.
will you bring this back to us again, or, okay?
Oh, so we're not gonna pass it tonight, it'll come back to the
I
next
think we have
meeting.
to come back with it after.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of like, I knew the election report is coming to one of the next 2 meetings, so maybe the.
I'll get Printers Corner on alerts.
Kelly and Eric and I will make sure
There you
you
go.
get one in time to get this published.
Okay,
Or you can,
thank you for
or you can
that.
add it to Friday's meeting too.
I'm sure, but we won't, no, we won't have that in time.
Let's go to six
I think
point,
there's time to wait till next week.
6.3. The tree donation
Tree donation.
recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a anticipated report here. You'll remember back in the summer, council received a report suggesting that we create a competition for art proposal in relation to recognition of tree donations. We have had tree donations coming in. And so the old report was referenced here, but I didn't go back into the rationale behind it, so I think everybody can remember that. What we're doing now is staff have provided a recommendation with respect to awarding the contract for the arch installation. And there was some more information that was circulated to everybody directly. So we don't have pictures or anything here in the package, but you did receive some. Any questions?
Councillor Carver.
Where is that going to be located?
We just said that it would be in one of the 2 parks, either the aquatic garden or the Jubilee Park. I would think that given the scale of this proposed installation, Jubilee Park would be easier than the aquatic garden.
The aquatic garden would be more fun.
So, but that's still pending, and we would have time to think about that if there's, wouldn't be installed till spring. So he's just gonna start sculpting the stone if we give him the go ahead.
I just had an image that if it's in the top lot section of Jubilee Park, is it in Jubilee Park? The top lot?
Well,
It's within the.
Yeah, Jubilee Park is the whole like.
The boundary.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have the image of this monolithic stone and children climbing up it like they do on the wave in Halifax.
So,
It's fine.
so we have a motion here.
Do the honors.
Sure. I'll recommend that council award the contract for the tree donation recognition art installation to Lucas Lang for the proposed design and cost of $4,500 plus HST.
Seconded by Councillor Feeney. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, let's go to the urban forest management plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this has also been a while in coming. It summarizes all the good work that's been done by Lauren and her summer intern Melissa this summer, and previously Jacob last fall, with respect to putting together the data to support the development of an urban forest management plan. Obviously, the heavy lifting from here is described within. We're looking to go out and post a request for proposals document to get a qualified consultant to do the work. With the competitive market environment lately, I'm just concerned to make sure we get a few good proposals. But before we do that, we wanted to verify with council that everyone had a fairly similar understanding of what we're going for. And so this seems to be the best way to do it. Lauren has drafted a request for proposals. We took core, principles and concepts out of that and said, would council feel this is reasonable? We're not looking to have everyone go through all of the details there. If you have questions or concerns about any of the details there, happy to take feedback, happy to, consider some changes. But ultimately, this is all provided for context. The recommendation is that council direct staff to issue a request for proposals for the urban forest management plan. And then obviously, once that consultant is selected, they will be working with council. You'll get a first view of anything before we go as far as to consider adopting or publicizing or getting community input on a document.
So this is, Councillor Carver, then Councillor Now.
Oh, thank you. I just wondered if in the proposed frame of reference for the service, there be included a statement about the eradication of invasive or noxious vegetation.
Yeah, we have it in the scope of work. So the scope of
Is it
work,
there?
it says, part of the plan will support it's number 2, plan will support the town to effectively manage, monitor, and sustain the health and growth of the urban forest. And then it's bullet point 3.4 says include identification of at-risk species, invasive species, and hazard trees, as well as associated recommendations.
Okay, so I
So
missed
it's kind of left it, within that rubric, identify invasive species that could have an impact on the overall health of the urban forest, and then provide recommendations therefore. If you think that's clear, it could certainly also be some part of the vision.
So it's like, I can't find it in the text here, but it's referenced and suggested that recommendations be made about the invasive species,
Yeah, it's the second bullet point on page 3. If you,
the unpaginated page 3.
yeah, well, the staff report's usually pretty short. So.
Oh.
Councillor Now, you got a question?
Yeah, it's saying that they're going to develop guidelines for management of the forested areas. This is for town-owned property and private landowners, so we're going to be including trees on private land.
So the intention here is for private land is covered by the scope, and what it says is, this is the bottom of that same page 3. The proposed scope of Mahoney's urban forest management plan. The plan will provide direction for the town and guidance to property owners.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make it clear, like, in terms of council having a consensus position going in.
Yeah.
This is a document that will provide guidance to property owners,
Yeah.
because they have a significant role to play with respect to the urban forest. But that's going to be guidance as opposed to direction, and it will provide direction to the town in terms of what our staff and our contractors do.
Councillor Carver.
Yes, thank you. For the CAO, I just read that piece of text. And it refers specifically to at-risk tree species, invasive, it doesn't say tree species, and hazard trees, but I was referring to invasive vegetation such as Rosa multiflora, which can kill trees. So that it was that I was thinking of more than the.
Well, I would tweak that same sentence, but I think it's a good tweak.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
So quite some time ago, there was a discussion at council about cleaning up the forest, getting rid of the deadfalls and all that sort of stuff to make it more accessible, to the point of even putting in accessible trails through certain sections of particularly Jubilee Park. That ran into some resistance from people who didn't want to disturb the existing ecosystem because of all the critters that hide in dead logs and what have you. So what I'm wondering is, what is our focus here? Is our focus on the maintenance and enhancement of the forest that we own, to be one, to make it people friendly, or to make it more animal friendly? Or is it some mix of the two?
Can I?
Chime in.
Yes, please.
So yeah, I think it's a good question. So there's 2 things I'll say about it. One is that it is good to note that while this consultant will have expertise around the management of the woodland, we also have contracted with some external funding and accessibility audit the park along with other recreational facilities. And that's been conducted and we're due to receive the report within the next 2 weeks. So what we'll have is a bunch of recommendations concerning Jubilee Park how to make it more accessible, and then a bunch of recommendations concerning Jubilee Park, how to best sustain and support the forest there. So those recommendations will, I'm sure, need to be reconciled with each other. And that reconciliation process, I would say, is the development of an asset management plan, how to manage the asset Jubilee Park. And it would also take into consideration things like the replacement of the pool and how the town plans to do that kind of thing. So there's a lot of bigger plans for Jubilee Park. As to more specifically, how does this plan consider your point about maintenance of the woodland area there, and like what are the priorities for that? I think that comes back to this point up at the top about, you know, what is the overall vision? So there is a point, I think, in the vision where it says concerning wildlife, it just says where the urban forest is sustained and managed for the benefit of all species. But all the other points speak mostly to quality of life and you know, the residents' views. So I think we're not trying to forget, and in fact, the Climate Environment Committee had a recent conversation about other species that benefit from the woodland other than humans. But I think that the vision captures both human benefits and reconciliation with other species. So it's a very long answer. I just wanted to cover both accessibility and interactions with other species. I don't know if I covered it to your satisfaction.
Councilor Green.
Mayor, just a couple of thoughts. So, you know, out of context, so what is a $30,000 for urban forest management plan get us and get the taxpayers? I think that budget amount and that investment needs to be placed in the context of how much money we've invested and how much money it costs to maintain our tree assets now. I mean, we last year, for the first time in probably 35 or 40 years, we spent $23,000 removing dead wood in Bayview Cemetery alone. Everybody knows we lost a tremendous amount of trees in the last 3 big storms along Main Street, up Pleasant Street. We had a huge tree fall down on Pleasant Street. We're all aware 5, 6, 7 of the town's largest trees have fallen down. I think the best part of the survey that was done throughout the summer with our summer students is that we now have a baseline to know what the inventory looks like that we've all kind of taken for granted. I've said this many times. When I first moved to Mahone Bay in 1978 and grew up on Pleasant Street was called Shady Street. And the entire Pleasant Street was covered with trees. You know, of course, I was a little kid, but they were very high, and the entire street was shaded by trees. Now there are no trees on Pleasant Street, and there are no trees throughout most of Mahone Bay. So without trying to be too nostalgic about it, I do think that this investment has virtue and it's worth our while, and it's going to be money well spent, because we really need to be able to tell people, like, in a perfect world, these are the kinds of trees you should plant, and these are the kinds of trees you should not plant. These are the kinds of trees that will thrive in Nova Scotia and Lunenburg County. These kinds of trees are just going to be a waste of money. And I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve, but there was a comprehensive meeting on this very topic at the NSFM conference last week. And so we're a little early, and we've had the benefit of having Peter Dunker here many, many times, and he knows our town very, very well. And we've benefited from his subject matter expertise. But I do believe that whoever is living in town 30, 40, 50 years from now is going to benefit from these investments we're making today. And in a lot of communities that I saw last week in New England, like the tree coverage is much higher around the streets. We've had comprehensive studies that said, hey, listen, when you have trees that are giving your asphalt cover, your asphalt lasts longer. So these aren't, it's not all about, you know, the oxygen. This is asset management. And I do think this is money well spent. And it's pretty hard to make a, you know, $50,000 or $100,000 tree planting program without a plan. So I think we did the survey. We know how many trees we have and where they are and what their species are. And now we have a plan on what to do next. And I do think this is going to benefit the next council and the council after that.
And when you mentioned the Mahone Bay of 50 years from now, let me just say that I look forward to it.
Fair enough. There's a motion in the deck.
Yep.
Or I think we have wide-ranging support around the around the table, and kind of reading the tea leaves, I'd move the council direct staff to issue this RFP for the urban forest management plan consultant.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question. Just to underscore what we've talked about, when you look at the proposed scope of this management plan, it's managing primarily the town's resources actively.
Yeah.
But it's providing
Advice.
guidance to citizens for their own properties. Okay,
Which they may or may not follow.
that's right. All in favor? Motion's carried. All right. Let's go to Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mayor.
Hyde.
So, you'll recall back when we did the budget, we had a thought that we would be replacing the electric boiler in this building as part of the town's effort to get our buildings off the fossil fuels in line with the winning greenhouse gas reduction plan that council adopted. We budgeted $30,000 to do that. And that was probably a little bit optimistic, but ultimately, Lauren wanted to do her due diligence on this, found an opportunity through Efficiency One to have a roving energy manager, I think they call it, come and review the building. It's Miles, who we've worked with before, who was seconded to Energize Bridgewater for a while. Now he's back with E1. So he came in and did this review. He's going to have a bigger report for us that will include reports on some of our other facilities. But right off the top, with respect to Town Hall, because it had a budgeted initiative, his recommendation was very similar to what we'd originally conceived of. A little bit of a tweak in terms of the reliance more on efficient heat pump systems with the boiler as a backup, but ultimately it's basically what was proposed. And his assessment wasn't cost quite a bit more, but the good news is there's an opportunity for external funding to bring that back down to the original budget. So good opportunity for energy savings. I know we've talked before about why are we still using so much energy where now we've got heat pumps in this building. But I think now we're comparing it based on our current usage with the building fully used, with the third floor fully used, and we're still seeing an opportunity for good savings on that. And of course, the elimination of fossil fuels in the building. So our recommendation here is to get the green light to apply for that provincial funding. And then presuming that is approved, obviously we'll end up delaying implementation until we find out, and then going ahead with the conversion of town hall off fossil fuels, which would be great, still accomplished within this council's mandate. So that's the recommendation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I have a question. If we designate the electric boilers officially as backup, does that create problems for us with our insurance?
The electric boilers are the primary heating source.
Okay, so they're not being designated as backup.
Yeah, no,
They're just gonna be used as backup.
Yeah, exactly. We would use them as little as possible because they're much less efficient as a heating source than the heat pumps.
Councillor Feeney, Councillor Carver.
So I guess Lauren's been quite busy. I mean, wow, this is there's a lot moving through her. She's handling a lot of important files. My first thought when I read this was great news, and I think we were all fully supportive and budgeted the $30,000 in this year's budget. I guess I was surprised to see. Thank goodness for the subsidization from the federal and provincial government that we can take advantage of, because I can't imagine too many people are going to be making conversions with an 18-year payback. So this is, I guess, from the taxpayer's perspective, I think this is a smart idea. And I think we should proceed with it. And while the going's good, but boy, oh boy, it just sort of illustrates the dilemma that I'm sure a lot of small towns have with aging infrastructure. Buildings of our vintage, be $125,000 to convert this building seems like an astronomical amount of money to me when I'm thinking back in the context of what I thought we could get for $125,000 just for other odds and ends a few years ago, but 30 is cheaper than 125, so I think we should move it along.
Councillor Carver.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, this $25,000 is coming out of next year's budget or out of this year's budget?
This year's budget.
So it is in this year's budget, but the work at this point will likely end up being in next year.
but it is this year's budget.
Yeah, so I mean,
Just in
you know,
reserve.
at the end of every year, we go through and we determine what we didn't end up spending, and if that money was either going into reserve, it will still go into reserve, and if it was coming out of reserve, it won't come out of the reserve.
And if we do not get the money from the SCCF,
Well, we'll either look for alternative scope or alternative funding. I guess one or the other.
okay. Councillor Wilson?
Well, I guess I'll ask this question. This roving engineer or whatever he was, did he have anything to say about in-ground heat pumps instead of just a straight electric boiler?
I'll take the question back to Lauren. I don't believe so. I know he did look at like kind of all the options out there, so why he didn't recommend that one. I know that also this was the same folks who advised the Home Bay Center, and obviously they came to that conclusion. So
They
that
do-
was E1 supported, E1 supported that project.
They did the in the ground version, didn't they? at the
Yeah,
beginning?
yeah. So I go back, take that question back to Miles though, and the full report will be forthcoming, so that may even speak to that. What did he consider, what did he rule out?
Dylan, would you consider, this is also under the grow your load umbrella too, really? I mean, we are moving off of 10 or, $1,000 a month of oil or more from the sounds of the business case to electricity, so we're adding more demand for the utility at the expense of fossil fuels. That's a fair comment, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and leading by example in that, because really that is the direction that residents will be what's best served to go in the increasingly green grid supply context.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Ready to move the motion, your worship, that council direct staff to submit an application to the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund to transition the town power off of fossil fuels for heating.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? No, okay. Let's go to the next. It is council remuneration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a motion made some time ago now, earlier this year, that in accordance with our council remuneration policy, staff would review whether it was an appropriate time to take the mechanism enshrined in the policy to establish a committee to review council compensation. And the motion that was originally made to provide direction to staff was fairly complete, so it's quoted there, but I just wanted to note that what I asked Eric to do, and I think he did a great job with this report, was to consider the original motion, which said staff should be weighing in on whether there was a rationale to consider a remuneration review. So that's why we've done this sort of scan of like units and their compensation. So that's to provide council with something that could help to determine whether it is necessary to embark on this. But if it is considered to be necessary to establish the committee and do a review, Eric's also provided here a proposed terms of reference. Ultimately, despite all that background work being done, and it is there and available for council should you choose to use it, staff's conclusion based on the review of rationale to support such a committee being struck to engage in a more robust review was that on the basis of compensation, it wouldn't be necessary to do it this time. And so we're putting forward a recommendation to council accept this report for information. Obviously, there's alternative recommendations there if you want some wording to go in the other direction. There are some other reasons why a review might be timely, but ultimately where we were asked to contemplate whether it was necessary or not, we've come back and said, based on just the compensation alone, it doesn't seem to be warranted. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Carver.
Well, I must say I was a little taken aback by the position that was adopted by staff here, which essentially was a position that it wasn't necessary to have the review. And I could think of at least two reasons why it would be useful to have a review. One is I don't think that there has ever, I don't know when the last time there was a citizen review of council remuneration, if ever. I don't know. And the other one is that if I am reading the first little chart correctly, that out of the 5 units in Lunenburg County, Mahone Bay is the 5th, the last, the lowest in remuneration levels for mayor, deputy mayor, and councillors. And that's sort of an interesting position, given that even though we are a tiny town, the members of council all have, in some ways, more, maybe I'm wrong on this, but more responsibilities than members of other councils, in that we have a wind farm to deal with and a solar garden and our electric utility and water utility. There's quite a few things going on in Mahone Bay that members of this council are responsible for or required to think about and attend meetings about. So I'm just interested in those two things. One is that I don't think the remuneration level has ever been reviewed by the constituents, and also that kind of interesting position of being 5th out of the 5.
So I don't have any comment on the first part. I think you're right. It probably never has been reviewed by citizens. I think that the 5th out of 5 is in misreadings. I don't think it's meant to reveal that information. The little table up above before you get into the, like, where are we on the amounts of money thing? Is that where you're
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah, that's the one. Yeah, just a plain.
Yeah, I think that's just meant to be
the middle column.
Total of 5 municipalities in Lunenburg County, we're number 5.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, there's no question that the rationale for the motion, I think, was in respect to the fact that there was about a little over a year left in the mandate. And it's been the town council's practice that a sitting council wouldn't vote on its own remuneration out of courtesy to the community. And so out of courtesy, the future council, whoever they may be, they would be the net beneficiary of the decisions made by theoretically impartial people around the table who didn't have a dog in the hunt. And I think the motion was well intended and well timed. I'm not sure what the tables really illustrate. What I do know is that comparing the council's workloads on the basis of town size is not necessarily an indication of the overall workload, to Councilor Carver's point. So it's not only the size, but it's the size of the overall service levels and the various products that the town provides the community and the complexity of that. For example, the utility, or the electrical utility. I would say more than 50% of town council's time is taken up on the basis of discussions around the utility. Well, more than that. And of course, our comparative councils, they don't have any utilities. So they have bigger numbers, fair enough. All their budgets are dramatically larger than ours. Add a zero, add 2 zeros, but doesn't necessarily mean the complexity of running the community, running the council is any higher. Now, I think everyone around this council satisfied with staff's analysis of where the council remuneration sits relative to our peers. What I would say is it's a third of maybe a fourth of Bridgewater. It's maybe, it's like a tenth of someone in Halifax, of course. It's half of, say, somebody in Lunenburg. So I don't know if that's a comparison or not. But what I do say is there is a lot of commentary in the community and on social media about the state of the remuneration package. And there's been quite a bit of, and I think that the future council would benefit from some adjudication of these things by the community. And so while I do trust the analysis from staff, I do think that the future council, because we only do this work once every 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and this is the only opportunity for these items to be addressed for the next 5 years. I do think there's some merit in having the community at large have an opportunity to say, yeah, we think this is fair, or no, we don't agree, this is not fair. And so, from that perspective, I thought there was some value in having in going through the process, even though you might end up in exactly the same place. And I'm actually won't even be surprised if we do end up in the same place, and everybody says, based on the tea leaves, plus or minus, yeah, you're in the right range. I think we probably are, but it wouldn't break my heart to see 5 impartial community members put their hand up and say, we agree, we think this is fair, or we don't agree, we think you should make changes, rather than have council who does not have the ability to speak to this and doesn't, to be frank, doesn't need to or should be forced to defend it. I do think being fair to the community at large, and to be fair to council members specifically, it wouldn't break my heart to see a committee say, we think this is fair for the next council.
We hired a consultant to look at staff salaries. Why not a consultant who absolutely doesn't have a dog in the hunt, not one way or the other, to offer an opinion on what's appropriate? It's very difficult to get counselors it becomes difficult to say yes or no, and say the citizens, right?
Well,
Depending on their personal perspective of council. And I dare say right now, I don't know how that would impact us in Mahone Bay, but a consultant would be, in theory, as objective an opinion as you're gonna get.
Accepting your worship, if I may, that I think our policy says that any review has to be done by a citizen-based committee.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to change the policy to use a consultant, my guess is it'll be halfway through the next council's term before we get that all done.
Okay.
Now, I'm of 2 minds about the whether it's needed, and on the face of it, it's not needed because our rules say you get a CPI increase, whatever the base was 10 years ago, it goes up by CPI. Fine, we're good. I'm fine with that. But to Councillor Feeney's point, there are a lot of rabble rousers out there complaining about that we get paid way too much and this and that and the other. And it would be good to have people, if they want to go talk about it in the committee room and take a look at some numbers and come back and tell us what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So if the desire is to go ahead with the committee, there are 2 motions presented there with respect to that. Terms of reference is included as an appendix, and I think it's pretty complete if you do want to go ahead with it. If there are any questions on terms of reference, or council can go ahead with those 2 motions to adopt the terms of reference and direct staff to recruit.
Councillor Carver.
So the terms of reference that are there is not stamped draft, but it is a draft.
Yeah, we've never had a terms of reference for this committee before, so Eric just developed this for this meeting. And he reviewed other terms of references of other review committees with citizen representation in other municipalities to create this.
Yeah, and I trust that Eric could lead could lead the file with the community members at large, considering he has all of the relevant information he's already compiled. So just to be clear, you know, I don't disagree with the council, with the staff's recommendation. I think it was, you know, clearly articulated what the rationale was, and I think it was also provided to council in the sense of, hey, listen, you know, you've got other fish to fry. This is, I believe if we proceed with striking the committee, this is really out of courtesy, I think, to the future the next council. I mean, that's the way I would look at it, to provide the next council with the comfort of the herd that the community at large agrees, and that this isn't, and I think any modest amount of due diligence by the committee members will underscore the breadth of the effort to provide this service.
Okay. What is your wish? What would you do?
And you want to do the honors?
Is there a motion here somewhere?
I've lost my.
It's under the yellow.
Oh, there it is.
I'm not sure if we have consensus around the table to proceed, but I will put it on the table. I think there's two. So CAO, there's two motions. There's one, do we need both? We need to adopt the terms of reference, obviously, to frame up the conversation. So the first motion would be the council adopt the proposed terms of reference for the council remuneration review committee.
Okay,
We'll start with that motion, Mayor.
do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? That motion's carried. The terms of reference are established.
And Mayor, I would move that council direct staff to advertise public members to advise. Advertise, is that what we're trying to say? Advertise for public members for the council remuneration review committee.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Wilson.
And if the advertising doesn't work, we're gonna be shanghaiing a few, we're gonna be wrestling up a few community members at large, so
You have heard the second motion.
somebody
Directing
volunteer.
staff to canvass for citizens to participate in the remuneration review. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Always a tough one.
Can I ask-
Councillor Wilson.
Just a question before we proceed, because I was a little confused about the numbers as well. And this is just something I happen to know, but in the councilor's remuneration piece, it talks about us being at 11 something, 598, and number one is 18,000 and change. Now, these are presumably people nearby.
No. Comparables, sizes.
Oh, okay, so this wouldn't include, for example, MODL,
Well, they're in there somewhere, but we don't know which ones they are.
but they're not in this one, they can't be, because MODL councilors get far more than that,
Far more than 18,000.
yeah. They were making $22,000 8 years ago.
Yeah, and Bridgewater does too.
So it's comparable in size, it could be anywhere in the province. I guess
Well,
is-
that chart should be both, according to the previous thing, it should be both.
That's
the,
what I thought, that's what confused me.
So I'll just go straight to the MODO council's policy, but we don't have to belabor it here.
Yeah, no, it's fine, it's just a.
It's a good committee for Carl the chair.
The former deputy mayor.
Yes, Carl, if you're watching,
Yeah.
we're gonna become, we're gonna
And
get
I
a
think
call.
Councillor Bain would be interested. as well.
Exactly, we want fair dealers,
Get voluntold.
you voluntold, fair enough.
Yeah,
Very well.
Okay,
because it has been, I think, 10 years since there's been an adjustment to counselor payment,
Well,
other than the.
wow,
The COLA.
we just reviewed the schedule.
Yeah.
I'd say the schedule looks a lot fuller than the one from 10 years ago, would be my sense of things.
Okay,
Anyway, thank you.
let's go to the staff report on the fire station HVAC.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one is less ambitious than the report on town hall, but as happens anytime, I guess, when you have a really major project, some things don't work out as planned, and in this case, we're talking about the canteen space. You may recall, council members, that the building was designed in two parts, and the canteen was part of the latter addition. And as a result, in the design, it wasn't served by the HVAC system. I think there was some discussion with the consultant around what equipment was going to go into that space. But the way it is used now, it's I think very warm with all the equipment running. So there's been a request that we do attach it into the building's HVAC. And, you know, this comes down to a pretty aesthetic question at the end of the day. I think council is probably inclined to do something with respect to an HVAC unit for that space. But the choice between a outside ground mounted unit and a roof mounted unit is mostly an aesthetic one. I'm certainly not super comfortable with a brand new building that has all roof integrated HVAC having a separate outside ground mounted unit for this particular room. And the difference in price is not insignificant. So I wanted to get council's go ahead on this, presuming that there is someone willing to make a motion that we proceed with the installation of a mini split. Please tell me whether you think that it should be ground mounted or roof mounted, because that I think is really the big question. Although council may feel this should be referred to budget, it is winter. I would say open a window, but the canteen has no windows, which is part of the problem.
Councilor Kerr.
So not wanting to sound Scroogey, but maybe it does sound Scroogey. The hall, the agreement with the town was that the hall would be paid for by the fire department fundraising. Is that right? Or the fundraising
The agreement,
capacities?
the agreement was that we would agree between us how the building was going to be paid for, and a substantial amount of it is to be paid for by the society. So what basically happened is they agreed to pay in respect of fundraising, or they were agreed to pay in respect of debt service costs out of the fundraising activities that they conduct. So we already borrowed for the full cost, less the town's contribution, and then that is what they're paying for. So, you know, it didn't cover any subsequent change after the point at which the agreement was signed. But had it been included, it would have been included in the cost that became the debt which they're servicing. So just to walk around, you're correct. The fundraising would have paid for something like this if it had been planned.
Councilor Wilson.
I'd like to move the council direct staff to proceed with the installation of the heating and air exchange, air conditioning unit that is put in as part of the structure of the building itself. So we don't have an outside unit reminding us every time we go there that we made a mistake.
That's a motion, okay.
Yeah.
Moved and seconded.
So make sure everyone understands. So this is what we're calling the rooftop solution, the rooftop variant.
Yeah, roof
The $20,000.
yeah.
So it should have been done.
Fair enough. So like I support the appropriation for the investment for sure. My two questions are really around. One is, so we are in the last 4 months of the fiscal year, and I don't have any real sense of where we are relative to the overall capital program, other than through the staff reports, which come out monthly, which gives so I think we're okay. We seem to be, some of the big initiatives are a lot slower. For example, we just have a $30,000 initiative associated with the town hall that we're not funding until next year. So I'm sure that we can move the money around. It's not crystal clear to me that this particular investment is fire services versus for the hall. And so when I think about like the hierarchy of needs that gets funded out of the fire rate, like I'd prefer if the town just covers this under town general. And so this isn't a hill to die on. I'm just thinking, for me, I would view that as not a fire services investment, but I'll leave it in staff's capable hands to make that final determination. But I think just trying to be an advocate for everyone, including the fire department and all the ratepayers. I just think that this strikes me as more community center and comfort station and providing a comfortable environment for weddings and fundraising versus strict fire services. So that's just a couple thoughts. Again, like take it with a grain of salt. It's not a hill to die on, but I'd prefer to have it not funded out of town general versus fire services. But anyway, there you go.
CAO?
I think great points, and it is a judgment call, and ultimately, I guess I'd rather the council judgment call now. If the mover and seconder would be willing to have the motion reflect that the source of funds would be town general.
It's fine with me.
So if you do it that way, and then,
Okay,
and if
Alright.
Kelly's got it.
I will.
Alright.
Your worship, before we vote, could I just hear again the argument for having the roof mounted unit rather than the ground unit?
Councillor Wilson.
My argument was, and would continue to be, that we've got a almost $5 million building up there that, you know, looks quite elegant, in my opinion. And the last thing we need is a pipe and a fan sticking off to the side somewhere that says to everyone who is interested, we forgot to air condition one of the parts of the building. And it's ugly on top of it.
And one less thing for a fire truck to drive over, or a snowplow to knock over.
Or me,
Mhm, that's
or
right.
the former chief.
Okay, Kirk, would you read us the amended motion?
This part of it, what I've gotten is that council proceed with the installation of a roof mounted heat pump. I'm sure that's not quite right.
That's close enough.
To serve the canteen space at the fire station funded under town general.
Okay. Mover's okay with that, seconder's okay with that?
Is there a cost limit to this, or just whatever it's gonna come out to be?
That's $20,000.
Is that with or without HST?
20,000, I would say, is the maximum. Like, we put the range there because we've gotten comparative quotes that are less than that. If we got it done on quotation, didn't run into problems, HST net, it would easily be under 20. So I think we'd say 20 is the maximum that this would cost.
And that includes HST?
Yeah, includes the net HST.
Okay,
Gotta be a federal grant out there somewhere.
on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. It's just become cooler to be part of the fire. Okay. Right, that seems the end of our staff reports. Council items, Social Regional Library Board. We don't have anything behind the blue dots there.
But we got a letter.
You get a letter from her and an application form.
It came separately because there's
Oh,
private
that's
information,
not
so
there.
they're not put in the public package.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
attached along with the tree information, the email I sent for the closed session. It's not actually for the closed session, but it's just the name of the individual. I mean, if some people are on the table now, that's enough to probably.
Oh, so we'll see the application in the closed
In the
session.
closed session.
Well, you got it in the email with the closed session stuff. Yeah, it wasn't intended for discussion in closed session. It was intended to inform this point right now. We just never circulate them publicly.
Got it. When did we get the closed session
On
material?
Friday last Friday.
On Friday afternoon. Oh,
You're smart.
I was still I was ODing on the conference.
I'd like to make a motion that we, it's the, not. That council appoint Gail Trice-Bach as the town of Mahone Bay's representative on the Social Regional Library Board.
You heard the seconds. You heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, and 7.2. Councillor Feeney, that was your item.
Mayor, that was regarding the Heritage
Grants.
Property Grant Policy, I believe.
Grant fund.
Grant fund policy. There were a number of edits to the policy that were reviewed and recommended to council by the Heritage Advisory Committee. There were just a few salient edits. one of which was to increase the maximum grant from $500 to $1,000 in kind of recognition of the overall inflationary environment. There were a few other housekeeping odds and ends, as well as administratively easing up some of the burden on participants in the program. For example, like previous iterations of the policy had things like you had to provide multiple quotes from multiple vendors. We eliminated that and a few other non-material edits. So we reviewed those at council 3 weeks ago, and now just are hoping to have those changes ratified tonight. So I'd move that we accept or adopt. What am I looking for? We
Just 1 second, I wrote.
I think we're adopting it now, aren't we?
The council approve, I guess you're right, adopt the amended Heritage Property Grant Fund policy as presented.
That sounds great. Good enough for me. How about I'll go with Kelly's motion.
You'll second it? Councillor Carver will second it. You've heard the motion on that question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Heritage Advisory Committee representatives. Let's go down to committee reports. Policy and Strategy Committee, there is a motion buried in there.
So I'll make that motion, from the Policy and Strategy Committee, recommended that council direct staff to develop a new draft noise bylaw, and I so move.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor
I
Wilson.
would second it, but could we add in a commentary about the muffler piece?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Including the aftermarket muffler.
But we have a motion.
Yeah.
Correct. We've had a motion on the modified mufflers.
Yeah,
The debate-
thing, like I said at the time, as if this had already passed, that we'd come back to them at the same time. Well, this one hasn't passed, but that one has. You're probably better off to not, I mean, you can reference that here, but I would only reference it in saying in coordination with the requested report on the, if you wanted to put that in, because they're gonna be two different, yeah.
Does that make sense to do that in coordination with the
or not
drafting the bylaw on the?
So you're saying we don't need it?
You don't need to
piece
reference
that
muffler
came
noise in
from
here, because the
citizens
motion was made earlier tonight. right?
on noisy mufflers is information that we now have to consider in developing.
But didn't the motion get
Wait. Mm-hmm.
made on the?
So-
Oh, on the course
It did.
bond,
It-
yes.
It did. I think our challenge is the cadence of addressing both issues, which are similar, but they are not the same. So the noise bylaw, I think, is a separate distinct piece of legislation relative to the modified muffler bylaw. And I think the modified muffler bylaw, which I assume based on the correspondence, the province is asking us to implement based on what Susan provided tonight. But I do think that it's going to take some time for staff to research. We're probably going to want to provide some due diligence. So whether that can all be done in December or not, I'm not sure. If the discussion this evening can be addressed in the same timeline. So I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over it if it takes us an extra 60, 90 days on the muffler. Yeah.
So can we live with it the way it is? This brief, okay.
And then, ultimately, I think staff would assess whether they do need to be separate bylaws. I know Halifax proceeded that way, but I'm still not entirely sure that Halifax didn't proceed that way because it was politically expedient not to open up and amend the noise bylaw when all they were trying to do was put through a muffler bylaw. So the muffler bylaw would have been, everyone's in agreement, this is easy, no real debate. And it may be they just did two separately to avoid that, but if we're doing it anyway, that rationale wouldn't hold. So we'll look at that.
Sorry, Mayor, one final point. Like it strikes me that the amendment to the legislation that was provided in the meeting package this evening is basically saying the province wants the town to put in a specific bylaw specifically tailored to the modified muffler issue. I think they actually use that in quotes. So in my mind, and this is just one opinion, like we would have our noise bylaws we've reviewed many times over the last 6 months. And then we'd have another standalone bylaw specific to the modified muffler issue. That's just one thought, but I'm not sure it does us a lot of good to conflate the two. If only in the sense of the latter is based on the direction from the province. And I think even the presenter tonight said, the province has said, we're not in charge of this, you're in charge of this.
Yeah.
And the police have said, we can't do anything unless you have a bylaw specifically around this item. So hearing that, I'm like, I think a 3-paragraph, 4-paragraph policy has a lot of virtue on the modified muffler versus having it a subsection 3, page 9, bullet 4 within the noise bylaw.
But I think we would find that we're not just talking about noise generated by vehicles with modified mufflers. You can buy a brand new car off the lot that's set up with a muffler system, and depending on how you drive the car, the noise to you in your house can be just as intrusive as if somebody puts an aluminum pot on the end of the exhaust pipe.
So without litigating that issue entirely tonight, I would think that the best course action right now is to just take advantage of the direction from the province, which was pretty specific. And I think that was like late 2021, that legislation came in, and I wouldn't try to solve all world problems. Let's just start with what we know is legislatively allowed, and we can actually try to enforce it somehow.
So that motion was already made earlier in the meeting by Councillor Wilson. And this motion, we're just gonna go with the short version.
As written.
As written. And it's been moved and seconded.
Okay. That council direct staff to develop a new draft noise bylaw. Right? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Your worship, before we leave policy and strategy committee, there is another motion further down, item 4.3 in the committee minutes.
8.3, the climate.
4.3 of policy and strategy.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
It's referring to future agenda items. And so there are 4 items there with assigned dates, and there is a proposed motion. But at the same time, council, in the minutes of October 23rd, so that's the minutes that are in this package, council approved that. There's the marketing levy bylaw as referred by council at the October 26th meeting. So we need to find a place to do that. And then we also wanted to add the reserves policy somewhere. So all I'm trying to say is that this list of 4 items is not exhaustive, because we had the request by council to do the reserves policy and the marketed levy bylaw.
Can we put one in January and one in February?
I'm assuming the marketing bylaw will be done in collaboration with all the other towns in the county, right?
Yes, MODL's already done a draft. We have some suggestions to deviate from the draft in some ways.
Okay.
But it probably won't take long for that to come back to the council or to come back to policy and strategy committee. So the question here is, where we're not necessarily supposed to get ahead of council, where it's been referred to council, does council want to have the discussion policy and strategy on the marketing before there's a draft, which is normally the way it is when something's referred there before there's a draft, in which case do we want to have it sooner than later, because get that out of the way before there's a draft, because we can have a draft quite soon.
I mean, this is just one opinion, but like I'd prefer for a draft to be coordinated, and then maybe reviewed at least by the mayors and wardens and deputy mayors and CAO committee. And then if there's some general consensus that I'd like to sign us up for a standard bylaw that all the municipality, I wouldn't want to have a lot of customization unless we thought it was really valuable. And so maybe there will be,
Yeah, because
maybe there will be.
There already has been a standard draft circulated, so
Okay.
the mayors have seen it already, and staff have seen it. And the deviation that we're proposing has to do with the way MODL is suggesting to enforce. It will be a lot of work and possibly not for much gain.
Fair enough.
So there's just a way that we could tweak it to save ourselves an awful lot of administrative challenge. So that's really what
No,
we're talking about.
I get it.
Whether it
I
makes
get it.
sense to jump right to, here's a draft, we have one little thing we want to talk about. I think the referral to policy and strategy was to have more of a general conversation about where the money would go. And that is not in the draft. The MODL draft doesn't say anything about where the money would go. So whether you need to have that discussion before you talk about the bylaw, I think council felt, yes, we should talk about where the money would go. And I don't know that that's an entire policy and strategy committee meeting by itself. I would think it could be combined with other items. Whether you combine it on to the next meeting, which already has a few, so it's probably pretty full, or, at least the one after.
I guess as you kind of triggered my memory, Dylan, right? So I think the expectation that there is going to be a value to have some modifications. Fair enough. I think you've talked about that before.
So in terms of agenda items, what have we got for end of November for policy and strategy?
So it's supposed to be about area. So it's a kind of a follow-up to Friday's meeting, which I think council may want to have, even though we have Friday's meeting. And then also, there was a piece about public information and discussion sessions that you put forward. And I assume that was kind of timely because council's term, is coming to an end. So if we're going to plan anything in that respect, we don't have that much time. So I think those were the two items that probably will take up the full session. And then I'm guessing maybe there's still policy and strategy for December because it would have been scheduled over the holiday break. So I guess we're down to, are we gonna add the marketing levy to January?
To make 3 items.
Yeah, I'm just reminding council that the reason that these items are listed the way they are is Councillor Feeney suggested that we spend an inordinate amount of time on policy and very little on strategy, and it was time to refocus on these particular issues to get them cleaned up and out of the way before the term does end.
And before budget.
And before budget. Now, my sense of the marketing levy and whatever the other one was, is they could probably wait till March. Until we see some language.
Or it's going to get rubber stamped.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty,
And what about reserves?
well, reserves have been, it's like Christianity, it's.
Stick it in March.
Been out there for a long time. Nobody pays
No.
much attention.
Fair enough.
They'll put it in March too.
Yeah.
Policy is only good if there's money in the bank.
Okay, reserves.
So really tonight, we wouldn't normally, it's the committee that discusses the committee's next agenda. And I guess council just doesn't need to do anything by motion in that respect now.
So we don't have to make this motion to council.
Since the committee had made a motion to refer the items to council, but council doesn't have to make a motion to do if only you're setting agendas now for like February and March, which you probably don't want to do anyway, because stuff will come up.
So say again what we're doing in November as area, and what was the other one?
Area, and then there's an item on public engagement, public information and discussion.
Oh, that was mine, yeah,
Yeah,
right, okay, got it.
Okay. All right. So there, let's see, so now we go down to.
Climate and environment and emotion.
Yeah, and community logo development, I think, had a motion too.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the logo development. Ta-da. Motion that the recommends council award the logo update contract to Ross Graphics on the basis of the proposal received.
I so move that motion.
Thank you. Seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, that's climate and environment is the next one.
Oh, that's, sorry.
Yeah, there's just the one.
Sorry, I have trouble with my cursor, so it doesn't highlight the,
Coyotes.
yeah. Kelly, do you have it in front of you?
I do, but
Did
I'm
you
not,
do it?
I can move it as long as it's okay for me to vote against it. The council directs staff to provide a report on the subject of coyotes with a view to community policy in respect of coexistence and conservation.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. On the question,
Can I just,
coyotes or coyotes?
you have your choice, but I'm sure it'll come out in the report.
Okay.
I think this is,
Yeah.
I said at the time, and I'll say again, that this is a monumental waste of time.
Is it not Department of Natural Resources?
Well, what are you gonna study?
So without having having heard the conversation, I'm just wondering, report on the subject of coyotes with a view to community policy in respect to coexistence and conservation. So we live in a town. And the last time I checked, we had a bunch of people that were calling the Department of Natural Resources in because they were worried about the coyotes killing their dogs or their small children. So that seems to be polar opposite around conservation. Like, I'm just thinking from a town governance perspective, if we want to weigh in on animal conservation issues or have any dog in the fight, it's a coyote in the fight. And then, so I don't know. I'm not sure if we should be asking staff to step up to something that I would have thought would have been the mandate of the Lands and Forests or the provincial government or the Department of Natural Resources or one of those other, but what do you all think? Like, is this how we want staff to be spending their time?
As much as people had opinions on the fact that the animals need to be controlled, they reacted negatively to the way in which DNR controls it. You get a coyote who exhibits aggressive behavior, and apparently one that comes close to people is doing just that.
Well, I'm no coyote expert. What I would say is that I did make a motion 2.5 years ago to encourage citizens to not feed wildlife.
Yeah.
That bylaw, which I thought made a heck of a lot of sense, as it was going to thwart exploding deer populations, mice and rodent populations, as well as assist in the bylaw officer being able to tell people to not leave stacks of raw food in their backyard, which would attract these animals, was widely criticized in the community and received little or no support writ large, and we couldn't get it approved at council either for a variety of reasons. So the idea that I'm either going to, one, be asked to vote on a motion to protect coyotes, or two, be asked to vote on a motion to kill the coyotes, I'm just thinking, like, you want my opinion on this? Like, I'm not qualified to talk about it, so I don't know. I
don't think that's our purview to
do
anything with regard to the coyotes, whether it be acceptance or control of them, or
it's a DNR.
It's not our responsibility.
Where are the traps set?
Pardon me?
Where are the traps set that that they're using. I'm assuming they are in the municipality and not in the town of
Oh,
Mahone Bay.
They're in the marsh about halfway to the.
Yeah, so that's not
That's
even
not
in
even-
Mahone Bay.
No,
So I know people enter that through Mahone Bay at the Fobo area, right? So I think people are assuming that it's Mahone Bay land where the tracking is going on, but it certainly isn't.
No, it's not usually our responsibilities.
Councillor Kerr.
Well, the motion was made by the Climate and Environment Committee in good faith. That they were aware of an issue with coyotes in the town by town people. And hoped that the town might be able to develop a policy that might help people understand that it is a balance, that it is coexistence, and that we all have to learn ways of behaving so as not to encourage or problematic behavior. So the motion was made in good faith. Did it get made right now? Kelly, you made it?
I did.
Councillor Wilson made the motion. So I can certainly see the problems with it, because if DNR is responsible for that, I think I would rather see this as more as an education process rather than directing staff to prepare something on a policy. I don't know. Could we ask staff to comment or not?
Staff, would you like to comment?
Just from a communications perspective, I wouldn't be comfortable advising people on how to deal or not deal with coyotes. It's not, I
It's really a
would
job.
direct people to the Department of Natural
It's a job for
Resources.
Facebook.
It's a what?
Job for Facebook.
So, yeah, the motion is, to direct staff to come back with a report, so the report may very well come back and say there really isn't, nor should there be a municipal jurisdiction here. But at the end of the day, when something gets discussed a lot in the community, it can be reasonable for the town to take an effort into it. From a staff perspective, I guess putting on the CAO hat and not just support person with the committee, we do have a lot on our plates. I think it's likely that this isn't an area that the council would want to put more town resources into. And so for council to just simply say, this isn't something that we want to spend staff capacity exploring because we don't see a role for the town here. That's a valid thing. It's different hats when you're in a committee and when you're in council. So yeah, that would be my take on it. I would certainly do the report if we're directed to. And it may very well find that there are other municipalities that have found novel approaches around coyotes. But until we've spent time on it, which we may not be best served to do, I wouldn't know.
Do we have someone to second the motion that Councillor Wilson? You already seconded it? Okay, let's call the question. On the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is denied. Okay. I think that is a Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. The information is there if anyone has a question.
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, please.
We receive these reports every month, and I did put out a questionnaire to everyone, asking for feedback, because I've been asked to meet with the executive to see how Mahone Bay uses the senior safety program. And is it viable in Mahone Bay? Is there something they need to do to tweak it to make it more viable for Mahone Bay? I had 2 responses. So I don't know if that means that this isn't important to people or if it's not something we do. I know I've made referrals since I've been a counselor to the senior safety program. I was going to ask the RCMP if they showed up today, how often they refer people from Mahone Bay to the senior safety program, to give me an idea of if it's being used here in Mahone Bay. And if it's a lack of people not knowing, so you have someone who comes into the town office who obviously may have dementia. Is there, and you know they have no family in the area, do we make a call, make a referral? That's looking after our citizens to me. It's knowing that somebody is going hungry because they're paying their heat bill and their rent and they can't afford to eat. Do we make a referral to, any person can make a referral, but are we using it? Do people understand about this? Do we need to publicize it more in our newsletter? Do we need to have information available here in the office? Like,
Would it be of any value to do a broader scope survey? I know it's just not another survey, but with 3 or 4 questions in the mayor's newsletter or on the town, a town website piece, and people who choose to can answer. You make the questions relevant to trying to find out who knows about it, I think is probably the most important thing. But Councillor Carver, you've been involved with it for a long time.
I'm not right now.
I know you're not right now, but what would your past experience tell you?
In terms of getting information, that's.
Well, why is it that we don't know how widely used it is in Mahone Bay? Why aren't people using it?
Well, I'd say that the statistics would show that proportionately Mahone Bay is using the senior safety services.
Okay.
Proportionate to the population, roughly. And yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay. Anyone?
So, just as an aside, one interesting thing with this report is there is no communication thing there to tell you how to get hold of them.
No communication.
There's no phone number, there's nothing that I can find that says, here we are, here's where to find us.
That's interesting.
If I were-
That would be useful. There are brochures, I don't know if they're still downstairs, but.
Yeah, and they're located in the Bridgewater Police Department. That's where their office is.
Yeah.
But is this something that I know one person who responded would like to have more information? So about the services, I mean, they have this wonderful tree they developed of services that gives people information, if that's something that we feel that we maybe should make up some cards and have them available, or publish that list in a newsletter or something like that to make it available. I know I've given that myself to people.
Maybe like a contact point to put in a newsletter.
If you need food, where can you go for food? If it's to help, it's a reference for people so that they can move forward on their own, or a caregiver or a power of attorney can work on behalf of the senior. But I can tell you when I've made referrals, it's been dealt with very quickly, very confidentially. And I've seen some people really benefit from it.
Well, just a couple of things. I think Councillor Wilson's point about the need for contact information on the reports that are coming to council and to all other, it's a very long list of community people that those reports are going to, so I think that's really important. They also do have, the senior safety has brochures. They typically have been in the racks downstairs. I don't know if they still are. We, as a council, could certainly invite the senior safety coordinator to come and do a presentation, or but virtually, if that's easier. To learn more about the services and the newly developed community information sheets. Sounds like they're available now, could be made available to all the staff in the front office and to all of us. Hard copies, give us all hard copies. Be a hard copy, don't give other people a hard copy. Or circulate it digitally. So that's, more ways of making us and the frontline staff available as well.
Okay.
Of course, well, then I move we accept this report for information.
Second.
Who seconded on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. And the accessibility quarterly update. Any further comment on that? That was a rather lengthy document, wasn't it?
There's a lot going on in the accessibility world, it's amazing.
Oh,
Ellen just,
finish up what you were saying.
there's just a lot going on.
Is there any discussion on the vulnerable persons registry amongst in that group? Because that was a huge discussion point in hallways, and we had a table session, and Jerry Post, who is the guru of accessibility here in Nova Scotia, I happened to bump into him at the elevator, and we had quite a discussion, and he's really stuck why the province, they directly asked the minister and his staff several times during the conference, why not have this vulnerable persons registry? And there seems to be, it's just a clear no. And I think there were some yes and no directed questions at the minister. So he did say one of the interesting communities is Kentville has set up a very strong registry, and they've used the assistance from volunteer retired people from CFB Greenwood, who with their military background set it up very efficiently, very complete. And that's how they've developed theirs. So I don't know if we down the road ever get in that position, we may want to look at the 14 wing in Pine Grove. They do all sorts of volunteer work. With if we find we don't want to take staff resources to do this at a time. It doesn't seem like the province is going to do it. If we want to do it, we will have to do it ourselves.
Your worship,
Yes, please.
So a couple of things. I think Councillor Lotus-Croft's question was whether the issue of the voluntary vulnerable persons registry had come up at the accessibility committee, and it did briefly. And it was interesting to me to see that there wasn't immediately jumping up and saying, yes, 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 that's what we want. And I can't remember the details, but there was some misgivings about it to be further discussed. So the second thing is, and perhaps the CAO can comment on this too, because it's been discussed at length at the regional emergency management meetings here locally. And the request had really come out of Pictou, county of Pictou, where there was a lot of energy in getting the VVPR in place, and the provincial government managing it. That's how it had been framed originally. And in the discussions at the Remo group here locally, it was clearly stated that there was resistance from the province, and it was unlikely to fly with the province. And that Remo had sent a letter, have they sent the letter or planning to Dylan? Send a letter to the province saying that we're recommending provincial involvement in the voluntary vulnerable persons registry. And then see what happens. And at the very least, hope to get some administrative and financial support. Because the estimates that were provided at Remo were very clear how expensive it would be, both in person power and costs, to set up reliable systems that would actually capture names and capture drop-offs when people's situations changed. And the province is partly saying local organizations are much better to manage that than a provincial organization. So the Pictou people are hoping at least that the province will come to the table to discuss the whole thing and not just wipe their hands off it, but actually come to the table and talk about it with people who are interested, the regional emergency measures people and others who are interested. So that's about the extent of what I know. But the push was coming from several directions.
I know at one point, and it was when Joe Feeney was mayor, they did do a survey of vulnerable people with oxygen, people in wheelchairs and whatnot, back years ago.
Every municipal unit, I think, has some kind of informal list like that.
So Richard, as a firefighter, like, you need to know if oxygen's on in a house.
Yeah.
When you go in, what process do you follow?
We don't have any listings.
You've
A
noticed?
lot of them have a sticker on their door saying that they have also been in use. But other than that, we don't have a listing per se.
Okay.
Yeah, the sticker on the door does have some advantages, because one of the most challenging aspects of the listing is people aren't removed from the listing. A lot of people will think it's worthwhile to get added, but if you're a first responder and you have a listing that says somebody in a building, especially a multi-unit building, needs your assistance, and that person moved out 2 months before, it could cause real problems on the ground.
Well, also, you know, depending how long the list is, we're not gonna sit there at doors looking, are they on the list? You know,
But is it scary, because if they're not, you know, are you gonna send somebody in looking for somebody who's not even in the building anymore?
Whatever the list was, at one point, my house was on the list. And like, if there was a power outage, fire department would call and ask if everything was, because of the oxygen that was in use for the person that was using it there, sort of thing. But I never struck me at the time that it was a very formalized process.
No, I think the former CAO kept it.
It probably, yeah. Okay, with that, that's the last item on our. Did you want to move to accept the accessibility report for information?
I'll move that we accept this report
Okay.
for information purposes.
Seconded, Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor, the motion is carried. We have no new business. Okay, then that concludes our agenda of regular agenda. We're now going to entertain a motion to go in camera. Before we do that, how many folks do we have at home? 500? Does anyone wish to? No questions? Okay. Hearing none, I would like to thank the 5 people, and however many others have already left who chose to join us tonight. I know it's not the most interesting way to watch council, but consider coming down to the council chamber for the next meeting. Somebody want to make a motion to go in camera? So moved. Do we have a seconder?
Just
Councillor Carver, yes.
specify that it would be to discuss the MGA 22-2E contract negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Do you have, you're seconding too, Councillor Carver, all in favor? The motion's carried. We will go in camera